The air was filled with celebration. In the small town of Custer, South Dakota, the 4th of July weekend was in full swing. Families gathered in Way Park, children running around with flags, a brass band playing in the background, and a hot dog eating contest had just begun under a red and white striped tent. Among the contestants was Walter Eagletail, a 47-year-old local known for his friendly nature, cheerful laugh, and love of social events. Everything was going as expected. People applauded. Someone took photos on their phone, and Walter kept up with other contestants. Suddenly, the crowd's laughter turned to confusion. Walter began to choke. Passerby shouted for help. Someone performed CPR, but the piece of hot dog stuck in his throat wouldn't come out. He didn't die from something people usually fear when it comes to food. No severe allergic reaction, no hidden poisoning. He simply choked on a hot dog. A trivial bite turning into a fatal mistake. In this episode, we'll look at real-life cases where death came not with thunder and terror, but through absurdity, suddenly, surreally, and very much in the real world. The people you'll learn about now simply made one bad decision that seemed harmless until it happened. Viewer discretion is advised. In the quiet rural area of Taranaki on New Zealand's North Island, a man named Ivan Segedin had become infamous among the local police. Over the course of 4 years, he had been stopped 32 times, and each encounter had ended in the same way: another ticket for failing to wear a seatbelt. Despite the mounting penalties, Ivan remained steadfast. To him, the seatbelt law was little more than an inconvenience, and he had no intention of obeying it. Eventually, he found a way to beat the system, or so he thought. He created a fake seatbelt, carefully placed across his chest, that mimicked a buckled seatbelt. It was not attached to anything, and it had no locking mechanism. But to a passing officer, it gave the illusion of compliance. On the afternoon of July 22nd, 2007, Ivan was driving near the small town of Okado when his car collided head-on with another vehicle. At that moment, his own illusion failed him. With no real strength to hold him back, the force of the impact sent his body lurching forward. He hit the steering wheel with devastating force and died instantly. The cause of death was clear and tragically simple: blunt force trauma, the kind of injury a standard seatbelt is designed to deal with. There was nothing particularly cinematic about the accident. This man had been breaking the rules for so long that he never even considered that one day it would cruelly play against him. Ivan Segedin tried to cheat the law, but he couldn't cheat physics. Only 4 years later, and in another part of the world, a man made a choice just as reckless, though his ride had 2 wheels, not 4. In the summer of 2011, a long stretch of highway in the Onondaga County, New York, became the scene of a protest ride that captured national attention for all the wrong reasons. More than 500 motorcyclists gathered in defiance of New York State's helmet law, riding together under the banner of personal freedom. The event, organized by the local chapter of ABATE, American Bikers Aim Toward Education, was intended to send a clear message. Riders, not the government, should decide whether to wear protective gear. Among them was Philip Contos, a 55-year-old Army veteran and seasoned biker from Parrish, New York. Described by his brother as a rebel, Philip was never one for regulation. On that sunny day, he climbed onto his 1983 Harley-Davidson, helmetless, and joined the roaring stream of engines that roared down the highway. But what began as a symbolic ride turned fatal. At some point during the procession, Contos braked too hard, or perhaps too late. His motorcycle hit the asphalt, lost traction, and he was thrown forward over the handlebars and hit his head on the sidewalk. Emergency services were called to the scene, but there was nothing they could do. Philip was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital. The cause of death was clear and obvious: traumatic brain injury. According to the attending physician, if he had been wearing a helmet, he would have likely survived. His death shocked the motorcycle community and made headlines across the country, not because it was the first such accident, but because of the bitter irony. Philip died protesting the very safety measure that could have saved him. The accident was a grim reminder that freedom of choice does not mean freedom from consequences. In the end, the road didn't care about the protest. It only punished the fall. But you don't have to challenge the law to put your life in mortal danger. Sometimes just chasing views and likes on the internet is enough. In October 2024, a group of 4 teenagers, 2 from the Czech Republic and 2 from Austria, decided to make what they thought was a thrilling video for social media. They boarded a Vienna U-Bahn train on the U4 line, not to ride in it, but to ride on it. That's why when the train pulled out of Hütteldorf station, they didn't take their seats like other passengers, but climbed onto the roof. With the city racing by beneath them and adrenaline pumping through their veins, they set a record. Perched on the metal surface of the train, they laughed, gestured at the camera, and were drenched in the rush of their own recklessness. For a few minutes, they were performers, balancing danger and the seductive pull of internet fame in perfect tension. But as the train approached Schönbrunn station, two of the teens decided to sit down to get a better shot. It's unclear whether they misjudged the timing, misjudged their surroundings, or simply thought they had more room. Turning away from the direction of travel, they didn't see that they were approaching a footbridge, a sturdy and low one. One of the boys, who was just 17, was struck instantly and devastatingly in the head. The impact knocked him unconscious, and he was rushed to the hospital and placed in intensive care. Despite the emergency surgery, the injuries were too severe, and he was declared brain dead a few days later. His friend, who was slightly older, survived the collision but suffered a serious head injury that would likely change his life forever. This was not an isolated tragedy. In the past few years, train surfing, a deadly trend that once seemed like an urban legend, has made a disturbing comeback, fueled almost entirely by social media. Across Europe and beyond, public transport authorities have reported a staggering 400% increase in such incidents involving teenagers since 2020. What happened that day in Vienna wasn't just a stunt gone wrong. This is a result of social media rewarding risky behavior and dangerous stunts becoming viral entertainment. So, be warned. These challenges don't have to go viral to be fatal, because the algorithm doesn't care if you survive. But teenagers aren't always the ones chasing likes. Sometimes it's adults, even friends, who push each other with promises and promises. On the night of October 31st, 2024, as the city of Bengaluru lit up with colors and sounds of Diwali, one of India's most beloved festivals, a small group of friends gathered in a narrow alley in Kunanakunte to celebrate in their own way. Among them was Shabarish, a 32-year-old construction worker known in the neighborhood for his easygoing nature and sense of humor. What began as a night of drinking, laughter, and fireworks quickly turned into something much darker, something that no one could walk away from unchanged. Fueled by the booze and the noise of the festivities, the group offered a challenge, one of those reckless, impulsive risks that seem harmless in the moment. If Shabarish agreed to sit on a box of large fireworks and stay there while they were lit, they promised him a reward, an auto rickshaw, a prized possession for one of his wealthy relatives. Whether it was bravado, trust, or a misplaced sense of fun, Shabarish agreed. He sat down on the box, still laughing, and posed as if it was all just a joke. What seemed like a joke quickly crossed the line as his friends lit the fuse and filmed it all on their phones, laughing. Within seconds, the box beneath him detonated. The explosion was powerful and direct, sending fire and shrapnel upward into Shabarish's lower body. His stomach, thighs, and spine absorbed the full force of the explosion. His screams cut through the sounds of nearby fireworks, and the laughter quickly died down. Neighbors arrived at the scene, as did an ambulance, which took him to the hospital. He was transferred to Victoria Hospital, where doctors struggled to treat the extensive burns that covered most of his body. Despite their efforts, Shabarish died of his injuries 2 days later. What happened next was just as horrifying as the event itself. Someone had filmed the whole thing, and before long, the video exploded online. Outrage swept across the country. As the clip made its rounds, people began demanding answers and justice. Authorities quickly stepped in. The 6 friends behind the stunt were tracked down, arrested, and charged with premeditated murder. That same footage, the one that shocked millions, became a key piece of evidence in the case. It was supposed to be a day of light and renewal, a holiday that brought people together. But for Shabarish, it turned into something much darker. He believed in his friends, trusted them completely, and that trust, so freely given, ended up costing him his life. While all of these stories seem like tragic mistakes, the following are not just cases of carelessness. They are so strange, so irrational, that they seem almost surreal. On a quiet Saturday evening in Middlesboro, Kentucky, the local Pentecostal church buzzed with life. Tucked away at the edge of the Appalachian town, the small sanctuary pulsed with hymns, pounding drums, and voices lifted in ecstatic prayer. But beneath the devotion, something else stirred. Something far more dangerous. in the middle of the prayer circle, a man swayed with rhythm, gripping a rattlesnake in his bare hands as it twisted and writhed to the beat of the music. That man was Gregory James Coots, better known to his congregation and the wider religious community as Pastor Jamie. A third-generation preacher, Jamie was the spiritual leader of the Full Gospel Tabernacle in Jesus' name, one of the few churches left in the United States where snake handling was still practiced as a literal expression of faith. According to Jamie's interpretation of Scripture, true believers would take up serpents and be protected from harm. For him, this was not a metaphor or a ritual. It was proof of divine favor. For years, he preached with deadly snakes coiled in his hands or draped over his arms. He had been bitten before, more than once, and had even lost part of a finger. But each time, he recovered, strengthening his congregation's belief that faith could overcome poison. But on the night of February 15, 2014, something went wrong. During a sermon, a rattlesnake sank its fangs into Jamie's hand. Instead of panicking or seeking help, he simply kept walking, continuing to talk to his congregation while the snake was still nearby. He believed, as he always did, that his faith would help him. When the pain and swelling began, he calmly returned home, surrounded by his loved ones. Soon after, medics arrived, alerted by someone concerned about the seriousness of the bite. They pleaded with Jamie to go to the hospital to get an antidote that could save his life. But he refused, as did his wife, who supported his decision. To them, seeking medical attention would have been an act of doubt, a betrayal of the very faith Jamie had dedicated his life to proving. Less than an hour later, the venom had spread too far. Jamie Coots died in his home, surrounded not by doctors or emergency services, but by the unwavering conviction that his death, if it came, was part of God's will. In the days that followed, his son publicly declared that he had never doubted his father's faith, even in the face of tragedy. But faith, no matter how strong, cannot stop biology. And faith, no matter how sincere, cannot neutralize venom. After all, nature doesn't follow orders. It just reacts. Fast forward to the summer of 2022 in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. A man stood at the edge of a pond near a residential neighborhood, the water glistening in the morning sun, and his friends begged him not to go in. But the guy just laughed, waved them off, and stepped into the water. This wasn't just any lake, beach, or swimming hole. This was alligator territory. Everyone knew it. The local authorities had posted warnings, the residents had spread the word, and even the man himself, who waded into the water to impress his friends, wasn't ignorant of the danger. He simply laughed it off, brushing aside the warnings as nonsense. Nothing bad would happen, he promised. But a few minutes later, it happened. An alligator quickly and silently emerged from the surface. He suddenly grabbed the man, pulled him further into the water, and held him in a tight grip. By the time rescuers arrived, it was too late. Wildlife officials found and euthanized the animal, and only then was the man's body pulled from the pond. Most people know better than to swim in waters where alligators live, but in this case, one man ignored the warnings and paid the price. Unfortunately, death doesn't ask when to come. Sometimes it comes in the most ridiculous form, like a piece of gum. In December 2009, in the quiet Ukrainian town of Konotop, a 25-year-old chemistry student sat at his desk, experimenting, as he often did. His name was Volodymyr Lykonos, and he had a reputation for being not reckless, but curious. Passionate about his craft, he often conducted home tests, mixing compounds to see what reactions they might cause. One of his strange habits was dipping his chewing gum into citric acid powder to prolong the taste. But that day, he reached for the wrong container. Without realizing it, Volodymyr had grabbed a substance 4 times more powerful than TNT. He popped the gum into his mouth, and the explosion occurred instantly. The explosion ripped off his jaw and destroyed most of his face. By the time his family reached him, it was too late. Forensic experts later confirmed that the explosive and citric acid looked almost identical, both fine white powders, and were stored side by side without any labels. He had only wanted a burst of flavor. Instead, he unknowingly reached for death and bit down hard. All of these stories had one thing in common. They were preventable. So, before you ignore the warnings or take the danger as a joke, remember, none of them planned to die that day. but that didn't stop death from coming. Let us know in the comments which story left the biggest mark, and subscribe for more true stories that are stranger and darker than fiction.